It is impossible to have an international break without an injury scare. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is incredibly appreciated. I hope you've had a fantastic week. Indeed, you're ready for the weekend because it is here. However, the sad news is there's no Arsenal because it is, as mentioned at the opening of today's episode, the international break, which means that only nations are playing and no clubs are in action. However, it does mean, I guess, that we're just 1 week away from its return and a North London derby, of course, to look forward to in a really big week of action for the Gunners with Spurs and then Atalanta and Manchester City all in the space of just 8 days. So I guess we can't moan too much because there's plenty to be excited for. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat box. Thank you so much as always for doing so. Black Shine, Paul, Stevie, I see you. Stephen, NSW, Damien, Paul, Arasilki, Jurgen. We've got Knowledge and Grantley Poos, Angela, Shari, Glenn, Edison, Matt G, Rowan, Martin, Luke. Thank you to you all, as always, for tuning in. And TJ in the chat says, hello, first time watching live from Washington, and it's midnight. Well, thank you, TJ, for your kind words and kind support. It is incredibly appreciated. So thank you to you. And what I'm going to say from this point forward is that the link to the live event will remain down in the description. However, I'm probably going to do very little in the way of promoting it because tickets are going so well that I don't need to. So thank you to all those that have bought tickets now. I imagine we'll be selling out in within the next week, which is just brilliant. So thank you to everybody that's bought tickets. If you still need to get one, I wouldn't hang around at this point because they have gone very, very well indeed. So thank you to you all. Right, shall we tune in to today's stories? I think we should. Saka wins the Player of the Month for August. I have issues with this. Not to say that Saka hasn't been good. Saka absolutely has been good. But I think David Raya has been absolutely mugged off here. I don't know how David Raya has not won Arsenal's Player of the Month because, quite frankly, yes, Saka has got an important goal against Wolves. He obviously set up the goal for Havertz and he set up the goal for Partey against Villa. But if we're being very honest, Raya is the reason why we have got the points that we have got so far this season. Raya has kept us where we are and has been absolutely astonishingly good. So I appreciate Saka and think he's definitely a worthy nominee for the Player of the Month award. But yeah, I mean, goodness gracious me, David Raya has been absolutely mugged off there because I think he's very deserving of that award. He'll probably get one soon enough. In some ways, I hope that he doesn't because it would mean that we'd be incredibly under the cosh. A little bit of transfer news for you. Memphis Depay and Anthony Martial, two players that, of course, have been on the free agents market. They're set to be taking off of it very soon as both are heading towards moves to Brazil. Flamengo have made contact with Martial over a potential move, while the Corinthians are close to signing Depay for the forthcoming year as well. So those, including myself, that had raised Depay as a potential name that Arsenal could look at. It seems Arsenal's openness to the free agent market is not necessarily there. So neither of Depay or Martial will be making a return to the Premier League, it seems. Moving into youth football action, and the UEFA Youth Cup has been announced, of course. And Arsenal, despite playing 8 games in the senior version of the Champions League, the Arsenal youth team, who, if we're being very honest, have not had the best of times in the UEFA Youth League of late. It's been a bit of a struggle playing these competitions, and they're going to be without some key players like, I imagine, Miles Lewis-Skelly and, of course, Ethan Waneri, who will probably be included in Arsenal's Champions League squad, Tommy Setford, as well as Arsenal's third-choice goalkeeper. But they will be playing 6 games as opposed to 8, but they are the first 6 teams that Arsenal will be playing: Atalanta, PSG, Shakhtar Donetsk, Inter Milan, Sporting, and Monaco will make up the 6 teams that Arsenal's youth side will play in Europe over the course of a September to November period. Into international football, and Gabriel started and kept a clean sheet as Brazil beat Ecuador 1-0. It's an interesting side Brazil are using at the moment. They've got the newly signed Wolves midfielder Andre in their midfield. They've got Luis Enrique on the right-hand side. Left back known as Arana, who I can't say I'm too familiar with, but Gabriel's playing a back two with Marquinhos with Danilo. Yeah, that Danilo has been around the block a fair while these days. Real Madrid, Manchester City, of course. He is at right back with Alisson starting in goal. Bruno Guimaraes and Paqueta in midfield alongside Andre, with Rodrigo playing in a centre-forward role. Of course, player had been linked and suggested potentially as maybe an option for Arsenal last summer, especially as his minutes at Real Madrid have diminished. In fact, there was a little bit of a Real Madrid drama brewing, apparently, because Jude Bellingham included a picture of himself with Vinicius Jr. and also with Kylian Mbappe. Hours later, I saw on social media last night that Rodrigo posted the picture with Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe, but no Jude Bellingham. So I don't know if there's some issues going on behind the scenes with the Brazilian players, or not just the Brazil player, but of course with Jude Bellingham as well. There's maybe a little bit of tension there. Interesting indirect posting from footballers. Moving on to the bigger news of today and sticking on the international scene, the frustration has grown, of course, with the international break, because last night in Italy's game against France, which was a really entertaining game, actually, and DiMarco scored an absolutely fantastic goal in the fixture, one that should definitely be checked out. But I do think that what we've got to be most concerned by, most focused on, is the injury that was suffered by Riccardo Calafiori. A very frustrating result, and one in which obviously will be annoying Arsenal fans. That said, it is worth pointing out that the Italian staff have suggested that this hopefully is not going to be too serious. Fabrizio Romano tweeting the information yesterday evening that it's not thought to be too serious, and he could even be a part of Italy's second game. Italy beating France 3-1 in this fixture in France. Very impressive performance, despite their disappointment at the Euros this summer. Calafiori starting, Saliba also starting. But Calafiori, it was a really strange moment where one of the France players kind of falls on top of Calafiori while he's running, which kind of, I think, in some ways, it looked potentially like a bit of an ankle injury, just a bit of a twist. Hopefully it's not too serious. And if it is indeed any concern, hopefully Arsenal are onto the Italian side to make sure that they hold back in terms of using him in their next game. But considering the Italian staff have supposedly thought that he couldn't be available for their next international game, it does seem to be that it's not too serious at all. Hopefully he'll be all right for the North London derby, if indeed he would even be starting in that game. The headline chat today is a bit of an interesting one, however, especially for an international break. It doesn't specifically relate to Arsenal, but anything in the Premier League, of course, has an indirect impact on us. And that's the story that broke last night regarding Chelsea. Clearlake Capital are apparently open to buying out Todd Boehly. However, they will not themselves be open to selling their shares. Supposedly, the relationship between Clearlake and Todd Boehly has soured somewhat. Bedad Ejbali, who is the kind of the co-founder of Clearlake, he and obviously Todd Boehly have been key in their partnership in really kind of pushing this recruitment drive at Chelsea after that $4 billion plus deal to buy Roman Abramovich out of the West London club. Well, it's interesting that the 62% that has been held by Clearlake and Ejbali, with a smaller portion, of course, being held by Todd Boehly. The relationship now is with both sides. Apparently, the suggestions are both sides is said to be looking at trying to buy the other out. Not good for Chelsea, and also not good because I've seen a lot of Chelsea in terms of Chelsea side of things. I do think that there is something to suggest about there's something to suggest about if Clearlake were to win this battle. There's a feeling in the Chelsea ranks that would be the worst outcome of the two. And for that perspective, when you're looking at somebody like Todd Boehly taking full control or Ejbali taking full control, the feeling amongst Chelsea fans, and as I was looking through social media last night, is ultimately that Ejbali would be the least preferred option of the two. But that looks the most likely of the two to win out. So that is definitely an interesting one. And I'm definitely looking forward at seeing what's going to be happening going forwards with, of course, these two. Anyway, if indeed you'd like to keep your pesky peeping Todd Bowleys away from looking at Arsenal transfer targets, there is, of course, only one place to do that, and that is NordVPN. And there is certainly an effort to try and improve your data security online and your way in which you surf the net. And NordVPN provides you that service. By going to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can get yourself a significant discount off a 1 or a 2-year plan. If you get a 2-year plan, you get 4 months extra thrown in free on top of that as well. And if you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee as well. Who can say any fairer than that? And of course, up until Monday, the time is running out. You can win a signed and framed Arsene Wenger Messi 22 Arsenal shirt. There's also some instant win prizes like a signed Pires shirt, a signed Edu shirt, and a signed Lee Dixon shirt. Don't hold back. Please do get involved. And there aren't many tickets left, I believe, to get involved with this one. Link down in the description as always. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions then right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show where we jump into the chat box and spend as much as 20 or plus minutes talking to all of you as much as we can. So if you've got any questions, please use the capital Q, drop it into the chat box, and we'll tackle as many of your questions as we can. I'll scroll up a little bit as well. Thank you for the kind words, of course, as always. Tony, dropping a question, says, good morning, Tom. With injuries to Timber, Marino, and now Calafiori, do you think a new signings are cursed? It's just the bad luck, isn't it, Tony? It sucks. But it seems to be just Arsenal's really poor luck when it comes to ultimately these types of deals that keep well, not deals, but just kind of just bad luck. These players just keep getting injured, and it's incredibly frustrating. Just before I go through any more of your questions, I forgot to obviously bring up the fact that we need you to help us to get to 1K likes in the morning. And Sunday weekends are tough. Weekends are really tricky when it comes to the international break, and they have always been the biggest threat when it comes to our 1K everyday run that has continued to go on for the entirety of this year almost. So if indeed you could be ever so kind to drop a like on the video and help us on our way to 1K every day, that would be massively appreciated. So please do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are indeed new. And if you're listening on catch up on audio platforms, you can hop over to YouTube as well by helping the cause and dropping your like down there. Dal, says, hi, Tom. Could we play Calafiori? And that, of course, I suppose relates to the North London derby, which is only going to be a week away. And I think Calafiori is definitely an option for us to use at left back in that game. Timber's been okay. He's shown some really positive stuff, but there's also been a few question marks next to him. And of course, he did come off injured in the end against Brighton in the third game of the season. So there's definitely scope for Calafiori to play the derby. And I have been impressed by the small cameos we've seen from him. But it might be that he starts the game against Atalanta in the Champions League instead. Mars Cannon says, I'm getting my tickets for your show tonight, bro. Fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that, mate, because they are going like hotcakes. So thank you. Richard says, do you think about going to win the league and the Champions League this season? I think Arsenal have to put themselves, Richard, into a position where they're looking to try and win everything they enter. You know, there isn't a competition that Arsenal should be throwing away. I know the League Cup is, less of a priority, and for good reason, but Arsenal should be trying to go as far as they can in every single competition that they can. Fuad says, I've been going down a bit of a Linkin Park rabbit hole yesterday, Tom, after your comments. Saw the full live performance they did with the new singer, and I got to say, she killed it. Emily Armstrong was fantastic. Great choice. And might be getting tickets to the show at the O2. I've got to try and convince the missus. That's the obstacle I've got right now. I'm not one of those, I don't know about you, drum and bass, I can do it, but any other genre, I'm one that I need to go with people. I'm not intending to be a guy who can go to gigs or to festivals solo. I know loads of people do it, and I respect that hugely. But for these and drum and bass, I reckon I could do it because I enjoy the music. I don't even need to drink for. Back in the day, it'd be like, yes, let's get on it for the raves. But I enjoy the music so much, I don't need to. These days, so I can often drive, as I did down to Brighton earlier in the year to watch Sub Focus. But yeah, I think I'm going to need to take the missus this one, so I'm going to have to convince her to come along. Plus, I am in a whole moving situation as well, which coincides with that pretty closely. Ty says, "How long do you think we can go without winning trophies before the likes of Saliba, Odegaard, etc., start to look elsewhere? Although the window was good, I do think that we've left ourselves short, which could cost us." I mean, I think that this is a question that comes up a lot, and the answer is that we don't know. We have absolutely no idea, and nobody does have any idea of how long it could take. If Arsenal don't win the league this season, there's no indication that those players are going to look to go. If we don't win any trophy this season or even next season, there's no indications that these players will leave at all. We don't know. It's just a theory at the moment. You could argue that that would increase the opportunity, but while Arsenal continue to be competitive across all these tournaments with the potential of winning trophies, at the end of the day, Arsenal can continue to highlight that they are amongst the favourites for all of the competitions they enter. According to the bookies, Arsenal are third favourites for the Champions League this season. You've only got to go to two places if you want to get a better chance potentially of winning it right now, and that's either City or Real Madrid. So, I really do think that the whole idea of players leaving because they want to go and win trophies elsewhere, there's not really too many places, if any, other than City and Madrid, that they could go to in order to get a better chance of winning those trophies. So, yeah, we're not exactly needing to worry about that at the moment. Sufyan says, "Hope you're well and have a good weekend." Tom, you too, mate. I read the Champions League squad was revealed and Skelly and Ethan were both left out. Could you confirm this? So they weren't left out. What this means is there is two lists for the Champions League. You have what's called the A list and the B list. Players under the age of 21 that have been at the club for a certain period of time do not need to be named in the A list. So that includes Ethan Nwaneri, and that also includes Miles Lewis-Skelly. So both of those players can still be in the Champions League squads as part of a B list. B lists tend to be named on a game by game or kind of closer to the first game of the run. So yeah, you don't need to worry about them. They'll both be in the squads if indeed they need to be or want to be or are going to be called upon. Boss says, "Why do our players keep getting fallen on?" I have absolutely no idea. It keeps on happening. Jam says, "Do you feel, given the potential injury crisis that we have, left ourselves short for this window?" I mean, we're in a position where we signed a 30-odd million pound player in Moreno. He gets injured straight away. Really unlucky. Last season, we spent 40 million on Jurriën Timber. Gets injured straight away. Really unlucky. We've spent 42 million pounds on Calafiori. He's now got a minor, we hope, injury for Italy. And then you have to ask the question of, have we left ourselves short? I mean, we are short, I think, in the forward line. I think there's an argument we could do with an extra midfielder, but we've lost one. So it's a little bit out of our hands. And I think the window overall, I look back on the window and I actually think we did pretty well. I really don't think we could have done much more when it came to that window. And you look at we brought in, 5 players? Raya, Calafiori, Mikel Merino, Sterling and Neto were all brought in. And you compare that to Liverpool, they signed 2 players. You compare that to City, they signed 2 players. One of them, their old player, Gundogan. So it's amazing that we're sitting here saying, we've left ourselves short, but our nearest rival brought in a player that they used to have and obviously replaced, you could argue, Julian Alvarez with a player that's not as good as him. And then, of course, Liverpool have signed Chiesa and a goalkeeper that will not be available for them for another year. I mean, you could argue they've only brought in 1 player during that window. So I do think that that's ultimately why Arsenal did what they did. John says, "Why did Arsenal not buy a traditional centre forward? No financial capacity, nobody available, obstinacy." If you want to find out, I actually did and asked people a question the other day. You may have seen this on social media on my TGT account. I tweeted out the other day saying, "I need a favour. Could you respond to this tweet with the names of centre forwards you think Arsenal should have signed over the past 3 seasons? Any number that you'd like to give is fine. Specifically players you think would be starting right now had we got them." That tweet got a huge number of responses, which I'm very, very grateful for, because the idea behind that was it was going to be the basis of an article, which I wrote yesterday. And that article you can read this morning. In fact, I'll leave a link to it in today's video description. So after you've finished listening to today's show, you can give it a read. It's nearly 2,000 odd words long. I spent a lot of time writing it. But basically, it goes into a lot of detail, looking at all of the kind of the potential striker options that Arsenal perhaps could have signed when it came to the window and previous windows. So I talk about Alexander Isak, I talk about Gyökeres, I talk about Ivan Toney, I talk about Lautaro Martinez, I talk about Santiago Jimenez, I talk about Dusan Vlahovic, and I talk a lot about Erling Haaland. And in particular how kind of his example and the target of Erling Haaland and what Arsenal have to close up, that for me is that for me is the crux of where Arsenal are at right now, is that you have a absolute monster in Erling Haaland who is returning silly numbers. And I think for me, just to give you a kind of a shortened version of the article, if you like, and I do recommend you give it a read, and I really would appreciate your feedback on it as well, is that Alexander Isak sticks out for me as the only real centre forward that I think maybe Arsenal missed a bit of a trick with when Newcastle signed him in 2022. I think it was in the January window of 22. Was it the January window or the summer window? But I felt as though Isak was really the only one. But when you actually have a look at his numbers are actually quite interesting, because we have a look at that 21 goal season that he had, which was last year, obviously looked very, very good. It was a summer window. August 2022 was when he signed. And he was signed for around £63 million to Newcastle. And what I was surprised by was his numbers, actually. And the whole part, I do an entire few paragraphs on Alexander Isak in this article, looking at maybe it's not as obvious, and maybe there are some actual reasons why Arsenal didn't. In fact, I don't mind reading you a bit of an excerpt from the piece. Let me share the screen with you so you can see it, and I'll read it along with you, because I think it is really interesting, actually, when you go into some of his numbers more specifically. So we end by returning where we started. So this is the end of the article, of course, so you can read the full bits where I talk about him and Ethan Højlund and Vlahovic and all these other players. But yes, I say we end by returning where we started, Sweden, because we started with Gyökeres. Alexander Isak is, for me, perhaps the best example of one player where the 63 million that Newcastle paid is a deal I look at maybe as a missed opportunity. His 21 league goals last season put him behind only Erling Haaland for the most in ranking Premier League centre forwards. I like his profile, his versatility, the age profile, the physicality, and more. But even with Isak, there are sprinklings of evidence as to why Arsenal did not make a move. Prior to Newcastle paying the big money, Isak's best tally was 17 non-penalty goals in 2021. This came with a non-penalty XG of 16. So he outperformed it that season by just one goal. The following season, he scored just 4 non-penalty goals and underperformed of an XG by 8.2. So the season prior to Newcastle actually signing him, he only scored 4 non-penalty goals, but was expected to score more than double that, which I think perhaps maybe on the data-wise is what maybe put Arsenal off in particular. He also had some minor injury issues prior to his move to England, which also reared their head in his first season, as he missed 19 games for club and country and would miss 12 more the following campaign. Even in his 21-goal season for Newcastle, 5 of these goals were penalties, and he outperformed his non-penalty XG by just 0.4, while having added only 4 assists since he arrived on Tyneside. Despite this, Isak remains a player I would be very keen on seeing Arsenal explore. I just get a sense from the way he plays that he might suit Arteta's style. Maybe we'll see it in the future. And I think what's interesting about this is that obviously he's never had that 17 non-penalty goal season that he had at Real Sociedad. He hasn't bettered that yet. So moving to the Premier League, moving into Newcastle, moving to what people describe as he's playing for a better team now, but of course in a tougher league. And Sociedad, of course, also are a very competitive side in Spain, and were, of course, when Odegaard and Isak were playing together as well. Very decent side, qualifying for Champions League, qualifying for European tournaments. He hasn't matched that yet. He hasn't reached the number of goals he scored for the non-penalty goals he scored for Sociedad in one season in the league compared to what he scored for Newcastle. And what's also interesting is that the 4 assists. Now, and that's across his seasons, at Newcastle, just 4 assists. And Havertz has last season racked up more than double that in playing as a centre forward. 8 assists and 7 goals in 13 matches playing as centre forward. And he's outperforming his XG as Havertz at the same rate as Isak. It's around 0.5 to 0.7. So very similar to what Isak is outperforming his XG in terms of non-penalty XG. So what that tells us is that both Isak and Havertz are very similar in terms of their finishing ability. Isak is not really any better than Havertz in terms of his finishing and vice versa. But what Havertz is better at than Isak is his collaboration. So where he's adding a goal, where he's finishing chances at the same rate as Isak is, he's actually contributing more goals through assists and through chance creation than what Isak is. And so that's what makes, despite Isak, for me, being a player that I still think Arsenal would be, would do well to explore and to look into. It is very interesting when you look at the finer details and when you look at the numbers between Havertz and Isak, that those differences between the two of them are not so great. So when we come all the way back to, John, your question of why did Arsenal not buy a traditional centre forward? The reason being Arsenal didn't buy a traditional centre forward is because they looked at the market, as they have done over the previous few seasons, and they've just not been convinced by the options that are out there, or the ones that they maybe are convinced by, of which I believe Isak certainly is a player Arteta likes. It's just too far. It's just far too expensive. 100+ million pounds. Arsenal were never going to spend that amount of money. Arteta said that in one of his press conferences while over in America on pre-season. That's what's really interesting, I think, about the striker argument and the striker debate. I remember when I jumped on TalkSport the other day and talked about Havertz, I was the only man in the room, of course, that felt Havertz was the better option compared to Osimhen. And yet the numbers are far and away supportive of the Havertz argument. Not only that, but there's a fair few people surprised in the comments, which I was surprised about, that felt that it wasn't wild of a take either. And also, I think Osimhen's loan to Galatasaray is perhaps an indication also of where the difference in levels are between Havertz and also Osimhen, and where maybe his stock is right now. So the whole striker situation is very, very interesting. And I think the Arsenal just simply haven't been willing to pull the trigger on a player like Isak, who, by the way, is, of course, only less than a year younger than Havertz as well. So there's very kind of well comparable. And Arsenal did have an interest in Benjamin Sesko. They saw that as a market opportunity, of course, as well. And they saw that as something that maybe they would be interested, but he wanted a quick resolution. Arsenal weren't willing to do that deal quickly, so it never really advanced too far. He ended up signing a new contract, of course. So there's a comment left, I think, yesterday. Let me see if I can find the comment, because I think it's relevant to this conversation. If I just scroll down a little bit more, bear with me 2 seconds, guys. There was a comment left by Paul. Here it is. Paul Ward in the chat yesterday said, in the comment section, says, "Morning, Tom and everybody. My take on the window is that the Cronkies are tightening the purse strings now that we're established in the top 4. I'd have a fair bet that Arteta is not particularly happy about it." And I said, who do you think they should have loosened the purse strings for this summer? To which Paul replied saying, could they have done more to get Šeško if they really think he's the next big thing? Rafinha, maybe Neto too. I don't believe for a minute that Mikel thinks we've done enough. Although, of course, the public line will be that we are all singing from the same hymn sheet. That may change a little if the results are not as we hope in the coming months. To which I said, did you read the Athletics article on what happened with Benjamin Šeško? Because if you haven't read the article, I didn't get a response from Paul after that. But when it comes to the article that I think it was Gunner Blog and Ornstein, I think, together wrote on Šeško, what that article reveals, with some really good journalistic sourcing of information on it, is that the whole Šeško deal, while seen as an opportunity, if you remember way back in, I think it was June, I was telling you quite strongly that this deal for Šeško, it's far more noise than what the reality was. The Arsenal were never at an advanced stage on this Šeško thing. And the things that I was hearing at the time was that despite all of the suggestions that, he would pick Arsenal if they come for him, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of noise around that deal at the time. But I always kept telling you, and was consistent in my view and, my information at that time on Šeško, was that this was nowhere near as advanced as what was being suggested by some. And we heard in that article on The Athletic that Šeško wanted a quick resolution to his future before the European Championships. And Arsenal at that time weren't yet willing to do that because Eddie Nketiah, as The Athletic point out, was not at that point sold. And there wasn't necessarily a showcase of real interest in Eddie Nketiah that suggested we were going to get 30 million. Had Arsenal have sold Nketiah for 30 million to Palace at the beginning of the window, there was a good chance that Šeško could ultimately have been an Arsenal player this summer. A really good opportunity that we may have seen him become an Arsenal player. But simply that wasn't happening, and there wasn't the indication that Arsenal would be able to sell Nketiah for as much as what we sold him come deadline day. So I hope that brings some clarity to those of you that are wondering why Arsenal didn't sign a striker, and maybe even some of you that think that the Cronkies have got tighter purse strings than they had before. This isn't the case. Arsenal have invested huge sums of money over recent summers and went into this window knowing that there weren't going to be too many opportunities to do too much business. So what they did do is they were very strategic and they were very clear and keen to do business shrewdly and at the value of which they felt as though players are worth, and also move players on in which they valued them, which is like Smith Rowe and of course Ramsdale and of course Nketiah. People criticise Arsenal for that Ramsdale deal. I find it hard to jump on that bandwagon of criticising Arsenal too much for that Ramsdale deal, mainly because I don't understand who on earth people expected to bring Arsenal more than £25 million for him. £25 million, of which I believe will be nearly all of it achieved because the add-ons are very achievable. Southampton only need to survive. And only if they were to be relegated, Southampton, only £1 million of those add-ons would be lost as a guarantee. Only 1 million is reliant upon Southampton staying up. The other 6 million are achievable performance-related add-ons in terms of appearances, etc., which are very achievable for Arsenal. So from my perspective, I don't really understand how Arsenal were ever going to get more than 25 million for Ramsdale. They got 30 million for Nketiah, which I was being told consistently by listeners, he's not worth a packet of crisps. Some were saying he's a League One player. People were saying, well, we should take 17 million from Marseille when they offered it. Thank goodness you're not in charge because we got nearly more than double that. And then 34 million for Smith Rowe with a sell-on clause. I broke the news, of course, that sell-on clause is more than 10%, which is a really good sell-on clause to include in a player that you would expect would be able potentially to move again for even more money further down the line. We will wait and see. Arsenal's business in the summer was frustrating to a degree. I understand that, but I think it was predicated on the fact that the market in itself was very hard. Very, very hard. And I think Arsenal in the end managed to bring in players that improved on what they've got. Calafiori is a potential starter. Moreno is a potential starter. Sterling, you never know, could break into that left-hand side, could even beat Trossard and Martinelli if indeed he does well enough. We know he's got the quality. It was about whether or not we can unlock it and realise it. So you've brought in 3 players there that ultimately could still be potential starters for Arsenal. And we did that in a window that it was very, very difficult to find the right targets. We're still short. That's definitely true. And I do think that we are short in centre-forward areas, and I think we're short in the midfield. But I don't think that's through a want of or a lack of trying. I think it's more to do with the market as it presented itself. And I think that's evidenced not only by what we didn't do, but what by Liverpool didn't do and what Man City didn't do as well. I think you need to get your bingo cards out, people. Billy G says, looks like Tom has been briefed on what to say. He has to toe the party line because he wants access to build his platform. Take everything he takes with salt. He has to pay the rent somehow. Oh, Billy. Now, this is the opportunity, of course, where you all know what happens next. Billy, I welcome challenge. I welcome also what you would describe as not the party line. If you would like to hop on the show and tell me what you would like to say, and if you think that that can't be said on this platform, here is your open opportunity. If you want to come on the show right now, feel free, and we can have a good chat about what you think I can and can't say. We can have a good chat also about what you would like to say about the club and its business. So if you would like to let me know in the chat box, Billy, if you would like the link to join us right now. I've got a day off today. I've got all the time in the world for you to have a conversation. So I think it's time, instead of chatting it in the chat box, maybe chat it on the show instead. So let me know, Billy, with another response if you'd like to hop on and tell me what you think. I'm going to go down the road of thinking and assuming that I'm not sure Billy will turn up. So just to respond in part A, never have I ever once been told what I can and cannot say about the club just because I'm a journalist. Secondly, as a journo, it is your right to be critical. And we are critical. And I sat here and said, if Arsenal don't sell Eddie Nketiah this summer for at least 25 million, they would have made a humongous error when it came to it on that front. Thirdly, I've just said twice, I think we're short in the forward line, and I think we're short in the midfield as well. Fourthly, I think we're ultimately in a position where last season we didn't win the league because of a number of factors. Mikel Arteta was one of those factors for decisions made in the game against Aston Villa in the second half as well. So I'm not really sure, Billy. I'm not really sure where you're coming from. But well done for making the bingo card. And I look forward to seeing your response in the chat box to see if you're going to come on the show. My bet is you probably won't. You will need a Cameron to be over the age of 18, which there's potential that you might not be over the age of 18 based upon the comment that you just left. Anyway, moving forwards. Mun says, why is Gabriel Martinelli the number 10 in the Champions League? I don't know. I've asked people about this. They don't know. I don't know why he's number 10 on the Champions League list. As far as I know, he hasn't changed his number. Hasn't changed his number whatsoever. And I do think that there is maybe a little bit of a mistake, unless I did read some of the other day that Champions League numbers and Premier League numbers can be different, but I've not seen anything to suggest that Martinelli's number is changing. I've certainly not been told that unless it's being kept quiet. So maybe that's the case. Let's scroll up in the chat because there's a lot of you responding to Billy, of course. John says, hang on, Tom. Eddie's at least worth a prawn cocktail. I mean, to be fair, prawn cocktail might be worth a little bit more. I don't know about you at the moment. My go-to used to be Thai sweet chilies. The Walker Sensations were great. But I've really moved towards these Walker's Max Paprika. They are, at the moment, my number one crisp. And I do, to be fair, like the black pepper kettle chips as well. They're great too. I know that you don't, if you're listening from America, you'll be like, crisps? What are crisps? It's the actual name of what chips are as well. But yeah, we get great. You don't get great crisps really over in America, to be honest. I mean, I might be wrong, but when I'm over there, I struggle to get crisps as good as what you get here in the UK. I mean, our cuisine is not great. Like British cuisine in general, not the best. I absolutely take that on the chin. American, Italian, French, Spanish, Indian, Asian cuisines, way better than British cuisine, other than a fry up and other than fish and chips, of course. But we do make better crisps than anyone else. So we'll hold that. We'll hold that very strong. Even Hamon Raffles, Arsblog and James, I still think we make the better crisps. Jimmy says, it looks like Tom's been briefed on what to say. He has to toe the party line because he wants to build his platform. Take everything he says with a pinch of salt. He has to pay the rent somehow. Smiley face. Jimmy's dropping in that copy and paste line. Matt G says, Tom, why do you not know if Martinelli has changed his number? 1 minute you're the club insider and being briefed on what you need to say, and the next minute you don't know what's going on. Which is it? It's funny, isn't it? It is funny. Fuad says, Tom, when can we expect Arteta to get his extension now the window is done? I don't know, but I'm hoping it soon. There's been a confidence all the time, of course, that indeed that we will that we'll see an update on this line, but sadly it's not happening. PW says, don't you think that if Arsenal want a player like Seshko, you just buy him, which then leaves plenty of time to offload players during the window? Absolutely not. Because that's what happens to clubs like Chelsea. That's what happens to clubs that are in financial problems. Clubs that spend before in which they want to move a player off the books and potentially will struggle to do so, put themselves in bother. This ain't a video game. This isn't FIFA career mode. I'll use David Ornstein's own words. The most connected and best, in terms of reporting on transfers, he is unrivaled in his knowledge, in his sources, in his consistency, in his accuracy. And when David Ornstein's sitting on his program talking about the transfer window from an Arsenal perspective is not like Football Manager, is not like FIFA career mode, it's because he knows and because we know that some people think that it is. And so, sadly, when you're asked about why don't Arsenal just do deals and then worry about the sales later, that's the reason Arsenal have been so good at their recruitment, and that's why Arsenal have a squad that they have now, and that's why Arsenal are in a position where they are now. It's because they're not going to jump the gun. They're not going to do deals for the sake of doing deals. They're going to do deals because they know they can do them. It's as simple as that. And they will only do that, and that's why they have a squad that's as good as we have, and why we're not in the same situation as a number of other clubs are right now, and yet we are still so competitive. That's what's important. Elliot says, Doritos, Tom, Americans make the best on earth. Doritos are all right, but they're just not as good a crisp as other crisps. I mean, Doritos are they're just branded tortillas, aren't they? Like the triangular tortillas, obviously, not the big ones. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry. No. If Doritos is what you're coming at me with in a debate about crisps, when I can list you all the Walker's Sensations flavors and all the Max flavors and McCoy's, like McCoy's for the boys. Like, you got to think about this stuff. It's just better. We just have better. I'm sorry. Someone's going to tell me now that, of course, McCoy's isn't British, aren't you? I'm really I'm worrying now. Where is McCoy's crisps from? McCoy's produced. Let's see. What's the origin of McCoy's crisps? United Kingdom. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. I had a real panic up there. That would have been really, really bad. I'm now checking what the origin of Walker's crisps are as well. I'm pretty sure it's in a UK company. Yeah, headquarters Leicester, England. Hold on. Doritos is a Walker's brand, Elliot. Yeah, I mean, goodness me, Elliot. That's embarrassing. Americans make the best. Doritos are British. Doritos are made by Walkers. Oh, what a day. What a day. That is brilliant. The crisp embarrassment there. Doritos being used by our resident American. And sadly, I can tell you, Elliot, that Doritos are made by a British company. Unbelievably funny that. I love that. Was great. That was what a moment of live. What a moment of live. In which case, I'll completely change my mind on Doritos and say now they're the best. Oh, this has got very Brexit all of a sudden. Damien says, if you need a dip for crisps to taste, then your argument is lost. That's a great point. If you need a dip to improve the flavour of if your crisps cannot stand alone, I'm sorry, but you've already lost the argument. But turns out Doritos are actually made by a British company. So we'll roll back on that, Damien. We'll roll back on that. Cass says, Tom, just looking into the future and if when Arteta leaves, is there a potential manager that you could feel could replace him? Not right now, Cass. Not right now, no. Thankfully, I don't expect Arteta to leave in the foreseeable future for a while. When he does, we'll have that conversation. And when we get to the point closer to where Arteta is expected to leave Arsenal, of course, we'll have that conversation. Liverpool look like they've done really well in getting Arne Slot. He's having a really good impact. It's still early days, but the immediate signs are, of course, very positive. So we will have to wait and see. Right. I think with that, we will end the show there. I'm sad to report. I'm just doing a quick scroll. Temmy's also left in a super chat. Thank you, Temmy. Tom is the Arsenal Party Democratic or Communist Party. Goodness gracious, we're getting really political now. Scrolling up, just going to give Billy all the benefit of the doubt I can. Just, I haven't blocked the guy. He's still there hiding in the background somewhere. He's like one of those, he's like one of those people that where there's like a critical comment. And I always notice a few likes on those comments are the people that sit and hate watch this show. Hate watching is the new thing in 2024. And I know that you are. I see you. Billy, you came with so much front and then just crumbled. It's a real shame. I hope you have a good weekend, though, my friend. I really do. Have a fantastic weekend, the rest of you as well. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And, I look forward to speaking to you all tomorrow morning, bright and early, 8 a.m. We live for this stuff, don't we? Have a fantastic Saturday, people. And as always, up the Arsenal.